Hey there, fellow night owls and dream chasers. Tonight, we are slipping into the shadowed alleys of the Ottoman Empire, where the air hangs heavy with spice and whispers, and the ordinary days unfold like a slow, unending tapestry. No grand conquests or palace intrigues here, just the quiet pulse of street life, the kind of history that wraps around you like a warm shawl, easing you towards sleep. As we drift into this world together, if these tales help you unwind, consider giving a gentle like or subscribe for more drowsy histories. It's the quiet nod that keeps this channel humming along. And while you're settling in, share in the comments, what's your corner of the globe, and what's the hour on your clock? It's a small ritual that connects us all, like distant lanterns in the night. Now, soften the glow of your screen, let that subtle hum of a fan carry you, and we'll wander these ancient paths side by side. Imagine you've just stirred awake in a modest Ottoman home, sometime in the 1600s, as the first light filters through wooden ladder shutters. The air is already thick with the scent of baked bread and distant spices, but there's no alarm clock buzzing. No, your wake-up call is the muezzin's voice, drifting from the minaret like a gentle echo across the rooftops. It's the adhan, the call to prayer, not shrill or demanding, but a melodic summons that pulls the neighborhood from slumber. You hear it 5 times a day, every day, a rhythm as predictable as your heartbeat. In this era, the Ottoman streets aren't chaotic battlegrounds. They're a web of routine, where faith weaves into the fabric of the ordinary. You mumble a quick response, splash your face with cool water from a copper basin, none of that modern hot tap luxury, and slip into your simple robes, perhaps a loose antari for men or a ferrous cloak for women, layers of cotton that hang heavy with the dust of yesterday. Stepping out, your bare feet, or if you're fortunate, leather slippers, meet the uneven cobblestones of the mahal, the neighborhood lane. These aren't grand avenues. They're narrow, twisting paths shaded by overhanging balconies, where laundry flaps lazily in the breeze and stray cats prowl for scraps. The dust here is ever present, kicked up by passing donkeys and the shuffle of countless souls, a fine, earthy powder that coats everything like a forgotten memory. It's not the dramatic sandstorms of legend, it's the boring kind, the kind that seeps into your hems and grits between your toes, a constant reminder that life in the Ottoman world is grounded, literally, in the soil of empire. You nod to your neighbors, Armenian artisans, Greek merchants, Jewish traders, all coexisting in this multicultural mosaic, bound by the Sultan's distant rule but living by local custom. No one rushes, the pace is measured, almost sleepy, as if the heat of the day hasn't yet decided to intrude. Your morning leads you toward the market, not some exotic treasure trove, but the heartbeat of ordinary commerce, the Tsar, where survival is bartered in small measures. The lanes widen slightly as you approach, the dust giving way to packed earth underfoot, and the air fills with the low murmur of haggling voices. Weights clink softly on brass scales, those heavy stone or metal measures that merchants balance with a practiced eye. No digital precision here, just the honest, or sometimes sly, heft of iron against grain or cloth. You pause at a stall, perhaps to buy a measure of olives or lentils, watching the vendor tip the scale with a thumb, arguing mildly over a fraction of a dirham. It's not high-stakes drama. It's the tedious back and forth of daily need, where misplaced weight could mean a lean supper, but mostly it's just routine, lulling in its repetition. Cloth unfurls and bolts along the edges of the market, endless yards of cotton, silk, or wool dyed in muted earth tones. None of the neon vibrancy of today, but practical weaves from Anatolian looms. You run your fingers over a length of rough linen, haggling with a weaver who's seen 1,000 such exchanges. Too thin for winter, you might mutter, and he counters with a yawn. Strong enough for the streets. The dust settles on the folds as you talk, a fine layer that the vendor brushes off absent-mindedly, part of the endless cycle of sweep and resettle. These markets aren't just for shopping. They're social hubs, where news trickles like slow honey, word of a new tax from the palace, or a caravan delayed by rain. You linger, not in haste, listening to the soft clatter of wooden carts and the occasional bray of a mule, the sounds blending into a white noise that's perfect for dozing off to, even in the midst of it all. As the sun climbs higher, the lane dust stirs more actively, swirling in lazy eddies around your ankles. It's not a storm, just the accumulation of foot traffic, pilgrims heading to the mosque, apprentices hauling bundles, women with baskets balanced on their heads, veils fluttering slightly. You weave through, perhaps stopping at a fountain for a sip of water from a shared cup, the cool trickle a brief respite from the growing warmth. The ordinary Ottoman street isn't glamorous. It's a place where life unfolds in small, unremarkable acts, measuring spices by the pinch, folding cloth for a new garment, kicking up dust that will settle again by nightfall. There's a quiet poetry to it, though, in the way the call to prayer echoes once more, pulling everyone toward the mosque for a moment of collective pause. You join the flow, your steps sinking with the crowd, the weights of the market forgotten for now, as the dust trails behind like a sleepy shadow. But this is just the beginning of the day. The market hums on, with its bolts of cloth waiting to be cut and its scales tipping endlessly. In the next part, we'll delve deeper into the stalls, the sense of spices mingling with the dust, and the subtle art of the bargain that defined these ordinary hours. For now, let the rhythm carry you. As the muezzin's call fades into the morning haze, blending with the first stirrings of the market, you find yourself drawn deeper into the Saras embrace. The lanes here aren't wide boulevards of empire. They're narrow veins pulsing with the quiet blood of commerce, where every step kicks up that persistent lane dust, a fine, silken powder that dances in the slanting sunlight like forgotten thoughts. It's not the dramatic whirlwinds of desert tales, no. This dust is subtler, more insidious, settling on your skin, your clothes, even the edges of your vision, turning the world a shade softer, a touch more blurred. You brush it from your sleeves absent-mindedly, but it clings, a constant companion in this ordinary Ottoman dance. The air thickens now with the sense of cumin and coriander, not overpowering, but lingering like a half-remembered dream, pulling you toward the heart of the stalls where weights clatter softly and cloth whispers secrets. You pause at a spice merchant's booth, the wooden table laden with small sacks of saffron, pepper, and sumac, their colors muted under a thin veil of dust. The vendor, a weathered man with a turban frayed at the edges, nods sleepily as you approach, his eyes half closed against the rising sun. No flashy displays here, just simple burlap bags tied with rough twine, and beside them, the all-important weights, brass scales hanging from a hook, balanced with stone or metal pieces that have been passed down through generations. These aren't precise instruments of science. They're humble tools of trust, or sometimes trickery, their surfaces worn smooth from countless uses. He scoops a handful of cinnamon sticks onto the pan, the faint clink of the weights shifting as he adjusts, tipping the balance with a practiced flick. 2 dirhams, he murmurs, his voice a low rumble that blends with the distant hum of other hagglers. You counter, not sharply, but in the languid rhythm of the market. 1.5, Effendi, the dust has dulled the scent. He chuckles softly, a sound like dry leaves rustling, and the negotiation begins, slow and unhurried. A conversation as much about the weather or last week's caravan as the price itself. Weights like these define the market's quiet order, you see. Every transaction hinges on them, grains measured by the oka, oils poured until the scale tips just so. There's no rush. The process is meditative, almost hypnotic, as the merchant slides a small iron weight along the arm, watching the pans level out with a faint creak. If you're a regular, he might favor you with a lighter touch, but for strangers, it's a game of subtle shifts, where a speck of lane dust on the scale could tip the bargain in unexpected ways. You watch as a nearby woman, her veil fluttering slightly, weighs out lentils, her fingers brushing away the ever-present dust that settles on the brass like a fine mist. It's boring work, this measuring, repetitive, endless, but in its predictability, there's a comfort, a lullaby of clinks and murmurs that could easily coax your eyelids heavier. The dust swirls again as a donkey plods by, laden with more sacks, and you feel it coat your throat, a dry reminder that in the Ottoman streets, even breathing is part of the routine. Moving along, the cloth stalls unfold like a tapestry unrolling in slow motion, bolts of fabric stacked in haphazard piles under awnings that sag under their own weight. Cotton from Egyptian fields, wool from Anatolian sheep, silk trickling in from distant Persian looms, all of it draped over wooden frames, their edges frayed and dusted with the lane's perpetual grit. You reach out to touch a length of plain linen, its texture rough against your palm, not the smooth luxury of courtly robes but the sturdy stuff of everyday wear. The weaver, an older woman with calloused hands, unfolds it further, letting the cloth cascade in folds that catch the light, revealing subtle patterns woven in by lamplight the night before. "Fine for a kaftan," she says, her voice soft and even, as if narrating a bedtime story. You nod, running your fingers along the hem, feeling the faint grime of dust embedded in the weave, lane dust, that ubiquitous intruder, turning white cloth to a soft beige, making every piece feel lived in before it's even sold. Haggling over cloth is an art form in itself, drawn out and deliberate, without the frenzy of modern sales. You offer a price, she counters with a sigh, folding and refolding the bolt as if considering its weight, not just in dirhams, but in the hours spent at the loom. The market around you hums with similar exchanges. A tailor nearby measures a strip of velvet against a wooden rod, his weights clinking as he balances scraps for a customer's order. Cloth here isn't just material, it's currency, status, survival. A simple shawl could shield you from the midday sun or the evening chill, but choosing it means sifting through stacks, brushing off dust that clings like a second skin. The air fills with the faint, musty scent of dyed fabrics, indigo blues and saffron yellows muted by time and travel, mingling with the earthy undertone of the lanes. You settle on a price after a few more exchanges, the vendor wrapping the cloth in rough paper, tying it with string that frays at the ends. As you tuck it under your arm, more dust kicks up from a passing group of apprentices, swirling lazily in the air, settling on your purchase like a seal of authenticity. Deeper into the market, the stalls blend into one another, a labyrinth where weights and measures dictate the flow of life. At a grain seller stand, sacks of barley and wheat slump against each other, their contents spilling slightly onto the ground, mixing with the lane dust to form a gritty paste underfoot. The merchant hefts a large stone weight onto his scale, a relic perhaps from Byzantine times, its surface etched with faint markings. You watch as he pours rice into the pan, the grains cascading with a soft hiss, until the balance evens out. Fair measure, he assures, but you eye it skeptically, knowing that in these streets, fair is often a matter of negotiation. The dust here is thicker, stirred by the constant scooping and pouring, coating your sandals and hems in a fine layer that you'll carry home like a souvenir. It's not glamorous, this dance of commerce, just the steady rhythm of lift, pour, weigh, repeat, a cycle as endless as the calls to prayer that punctuate the day. Nearby, a cloth dyer's vat bubbles quietly, the steam rising in lazy curls that carry the sharp tang of mordants and pigments. Bolts of fabric hang drying on lines overhead, dripping slowly onto the dusty ground below, where puddles form and mix with the lane's debris. You pass by, careful not to brush against them, but a drop lands on your shoulder anyway, leaving a faint stain, a reminder that in the Ottoman market, nothing stays pristine for long. The dyer, stirring his pot with a long wooden paddle, chats idly with a customer about the quality of indigo from Aleppo, their voices low and unhurried, blending into the market's ambient murmur. Weights clatter again as he measures out dye powders, small brass pieces sliding along the scale with a metallic whisper. It's all so ordinary, so repetitive, the weighing of powders, the folding of cloth, the settling of dust. Yet in this boredom lies a strange peace, a monotony that soothes like the rocking of a cradle, easing the mind toward rest. As midday approaches, the market's energy shifts ever so slightly, not to frenzy, but to a deeper hum. Vendors call out softly, their voices carrying over the crowd without shouting, inviting passers-by to inspect their wares. You linger at a stall selling threads and notions, where spools of silk twist in the breeze, catching specks of dust that glitter like tiny stars. The seller, a young boy apprentice to his uncle, demonstrates the strength of a cotton thread by pulling a taut, his small hands steady despite the heat. Weights come into play here too, measuring out lengths by the ashin, an old unit marked on a wooden stick, ensuring every yard is accounted for. You by a skein, watching as he winds it carefully, the thread gathering dust even as it's wrapped. The lane dust is inescapable, a constant in this world, softening edges, muting colours, turning the vibrant into the vintage with every gust of wind. Wandering further, you encounter the food stalls, where the air thickens with the aroma of simmering chickpeas and roasted nuts. A vendor balances his scale with care, weighing out dates sticky with their own sweetness, the brass pans tilting gently as he adds or removes a fruit. Cloth napkins, simple squares of linen, are folded nearby, ready for purchase to wipe away the inevitable stickiness, or the dust that clings to everything. You sample a date, its flavour bursting briefly against the dry grit in your mouth, a small moment of sweetness in the otherwise tedious routine. Haggling ensues again, slow and methodical, the vendor's eyes drifting as if he's half asleep himself, the conversation meandering like the lanes themselves. The dust swirls once more, carried on a breeze from the open end of the market, where donkeys unload more goods, their hooves stamping patterns in the earth. By now, the sun hangs higher, casting long shadows that play across the cloth bolts and scale pans. You feel the weight of the morning's purchases in your arms, the cloth bundle, the small sack of spices, each item dusted with the lane signature layer, a fine powder that seeps into the creases. The market isn't a place of excitement, it's a realm of endurance, where ordinary folk like you measure out their days in weights and measures, folding cloth for tomorrow's needs, brushing off dust that will return by evening. There's a rhythm to it all, a sleepy cadence of clink, fold, settle, that lulls the senses, inviting your thoughts to wander, your eyelids to droop. But the day presses on, and the call to prayer will sound again soon, pulling you from the stalls toward the mosque's quiet arches. In these lanes, the ordinary weaves its spell, not through grandeur, but through the subtle interplay of weights tipping scales, cloth unfurling in the breeze, and dust settling like a blanket over everything. It's the kind of history that doesn't demand attention. It simply envelops you, soft and persistent, easing you toward the next moment. As the market hum continues, with its endless balancing and bargaining, you might find your own balance tipping towards sleep, the details blurring like dust in the wind. We'll linger here a bit longer in the next part, exploring the faces and flavors that make this routine feel almost eternal. As the midday sun drapes a golden veil over the labyrinthine streets of the Ottoman city, the market's rhythm settles into a deeper, more languid cadence, like the slow draw of a breath in sleep. The earlier call to prayer, that melodic summons from the minarets, now echoes faintly in memory, blending with the soft shuffle of feet on cobblestones worn smooth by centuries of passage. Here, in the heart of what was once Constantinople, now Istanbul, the jewel of the sublime port, the ordinary life of the empire unfolds not in the shadowed halls of the Topkapi Palace or the disciplined marches of Janissary Corps, but in the unassuming exchanges of merchants, the gentle clink of brass weights on scales, and the ever-present whisper of lane dust rising and falling like a sigh. You meander further into the Saras embrace, where the air thickens with the mingled scents of roasted chestnuts and simmering pilaf from nearby street vendors. The Ottoman market isn't a place of hurried frenzy. It's a living archive of empire, where guilds, those venerable esnaf organizations sanctioned by the Sultan himself, govern the flow of trade with rules as ancient as the Hagia Sophia's domes. Each stall bears the subtle mark of its guild, perhaps a carved wooden sign depicting a loom for the weavers or a balanced scale for the spice merchants, ensuring quality and fairness under the watchful eye of the muhtasib, the market inspector who patrols these lanes with a staff in hand, his robes flowing like the Bosphorus currents. Pause at a cloth merchant stand, where bolts of exquisite Bursa silk unfurl in waves of crimson and azure, colours that once adorned the kaftans of viziers and the veils of harem women. The fabric here carries the weight of history, woven on looms in distant Anatolian villages, transported by camel caravans along the silk road routes that the Ottomans guarded with fierce Janissary outposts. You run your fingers over a length of soft cotton, feeling the faint grit of lane dust embedded in its fibres, a dusty patina that speaks of journeys from Egyptian fields to these bustling stalls. The vendor, a man with a neatly trimmed beard and a fez perched atop his head, measures the cloth with an arsheen, a wooden rod marked in precise increments, a standard enforced by imperial decree to prevent the trickery that once plagued Byzantine bazaars. This silk, he murmurs in the melodic lilt of Ottoman Turkish, was dyed with cochineal from the New World, brought by galleons that sailed under the Sultan's banner. His voice is low, soothing, as he folds the material with deliberate care, the soft rustle blending with the distant call of a water seller hawking his burden from a leather skin slung over his shoulder. Weights come into play again, not just for cloth but for the myriad goods that sustain Ottoman daily life. Nearby, a spice trader balances his scale with brass pieces etched with Arabic script, invoking blessings from the Quran as he tips saffron threads into the pan. These weights aren't mere tools. They're emblems of the empire's vast reach, calibrated in the imperial mints of Istanbul and distributed to ensure honesty across provinces from Baghdad to Belgrade. The clink of metal on metal is rhythmic, almost hypnotic, as the scale evens out, the dust from the lane settling on the brass like a fine veil, softening the gleam. You watch as a customer, perhaps a cook from a nearby Konak mansion, haggles mildly over a measure of black pepper, imported from the Malabar coast through Ottoman trade networks that span seas and deserts. The negotiation is unhurried, a conversation punctuated by sips of tea from tiny glasses, the tea steam curling lazily upward, carrying hints of bergamot and mint that soothe the senses and invite drowsiness. Lane dust, that omnipresent companion, stirs gently underfoot, kicked up by the passage of donkeys laden with amphorae of olive oil from Aegean groves. It's not the choking clouds of a sandstorm, but a subtle haze that mutes the vibrant colours of the market, turning the sharp edges of reality into something softer, more dreamlike. This dust carries the essence of the empire, particles of Anatolian soil, flecks from Balkan stones, even traces of African sands brought by traders who crossed the Sahara to reach Ottoman ports. It clings to your hem, a tactile reminder of the Sultan's vast domain, where dust from distant lands mingles in these streets, symbolizing the interconnected web of cultures under the Ottoman crescent. Venture toward the food stalls, where the air grows richer with the aroma of lokum, those gelatinous sweets dusted with powdered sugar, a delicacy refined in the imperial kitchens of the Topkapi and now sold by the weight in these humble lanes. A vendor measures out pistachio-filled delights on a scale, his weights clattering softly as he adjusts for precision, invoking the name of Suleiman the Magnificent, whose laws standardized such measures to protect the common folk. You sample one, the sweetness melting on your tongue, contrasted by the faint grittiness of lane dust that inevitably finds its way into every bite. Nearby, a baker pulls simmet rings from a wood-fired oven, their sesame seeds glistening, a staple that fed both pashas and porters alike in this egalitarian sprawl of commerce. Cloth reappears in unexpected ways, draped over carts as makeshift awnings, shielding piles of embroidered towels and prayer rugs from sun's gaze. These textiles bear patterns inspired by Ottoman motifs, tulips symbolizing divine abundance, geometric stars echoing the ceilings of grand mosques like the Suleimanai. A woman in a ferrous cloak, her face partially veiled in the modest style encouraged by religious scholars, haggles over a bolt of patterned damask, her voice steady and calm, weaving into the market's ambient hum. The negotiation drags on, not in argument but in polite discourse, touching on news of the latest firman from the Sultan or the arrival of a Venetian trading ship laden with European wool. Weights tip and balance, cloth folds and unfolds, dust settles and rises, a cycle as eternal as the empire's bureaucratic scrolls. As you drift along, the market reveals glimpses of Ottoman society's layers. An Armenian silversmith polishes trays engraved with calligraphy from Rumi's poems, his stall a nod to the millet system that allowed religious minorities to thrive under the Sultan's protection. Next door, a Greek merchant weighs out olive oil in ewers stamped with the chura, the imperial seal, ensuring authenticity in a trade network that stretched to the Mediterranean Isles. The lane dust here mixes with the metallic tang of worked silver and the earthy scent of pressed olives, creating a sensory blanket that envelops you, heavy and comforting, urging your thoughts to slow. The presence of the empire's guardians adds a subtle undercurrent. A Sipahi cavalryman, his horse tethered nearby, barters for a new saddlecloth, his uniform adorned with the crescents that symbolized Ottoman might from Vienna's gates to the Arabian deserts. His conversation with a vendor is measured, respectful, reflecting the hierarchical yet communal spirit fostered by sultans like Mehmed the Conqueror. Weights clink as the cloth is measured, the dust swirling around the horse's hooves, a reminder that even warriors partake in these mundane rituals. Food continues to anchor the scene, with stalls offering Boric pastries layered with cheese and spinach, their flaky textures a culinary legacy from Central Asian nomads refined in Ottoman kitchens. A vendor portions them out by weight, the scales gentle rocking a soothing metronome amid the market's murmur. You imagine the recipes passed down through harems and barracks, flavors that sustained armies during sieges and families during long winters. The lane dust lightly coats the golden crusts, blending with the steam rising from fresh batches, inviting a bite that melts away the edges of wakefulness. Cloth stalls evolve as the day progresses, now displaying prayer mats woven with intricate mihrab designs, pointing toward Mecca, a staple in every devout household under the caliphate's spiritual umbrella. The weaver demonstrates the durability, pulling threads taut, his hands bearing the calluses of labor in service to both craft and faith. Weights balance the sale, dirhams exchanged with a nod, the transaction sealed with a muttered bismillah, invoking blessing in this blend of commerce and piety. Deeper in, the market's diversity unfolds like a slowly turning page from an illuminated manuscript. A Jewish trader from Salonika offers bolts of fine linen, his stall a microcosm of the tolerance extended by sultans who welcomed exiles from Spain's Inquisition. Conversation flows in Ladino, mixing with Turkish, as he measures fabric against an arsheen marked with Hebrew notations. The dust settles on his wares, a neutral veil over the cultural mosaic that defined Ottoman urban life. Suddenly, a caravan arrives, camels groaning under loads from Damascus, kicking up fresh clouds of lane dust that shimmer in the light. Unloaded are spices, coriander, fenugreek, turmeric, each sack weighed meticulously, the scales tipping under the burden of empire's vast trade arteries. The caravan master, clad in a striped abiyah, shares tales of journeys past Bedouin camps and through the Taurus mountains, his voice a droning narrative that lulls like a bedtime story. Cloth from these caravans includes luxurious velvets embroidered with gold thread, patterns inspired by Persian gardens and Byzantine icons, fused in Ottoman ateliers. You watch as a buyer inspects a piece, the vendor unfolding it with care, dust motes dancing in the revealed folds. The haggling is polite, drawn out, accompanied by offers of sherbet cooled in snow from Mount Aluda, a refreshment that quenches thirst and prolongs the conversation. As afternoon shadows lengthen, the market's energy wanes into a peaceful hum. Vendors pack unsold cloth, brushing off dust, preparing for tomorrow's cycle. The call to prayer rises again, pulling souls toward mosques with domes echoing Seljuk designs. In this moment, the weights, cloth, and lane dust converge into a tapestry of ordinary endurance, a soothing narrative that invites slumber. Yet the day lingers, with final transactions under fading light. A tailor sews hems by lantern, his needle flashing like a distant star. The dust settles finally, blanketing the lanes in quiet repose, as the Ottoman night descends softly. As the afternoon sun dips lower over the sprawling skyline of Istanbul, casting long shadows across the labyrinthine streets of the Ottoman capital, the pace of the city begins to soften like a sigh. The earlier bustle of the Tsar, with its weights and cloths and ever-present lane dust, gives way to a quieter ritual, one that unfolds not in the open air of commerce but in the dimly lit sanctuaries known as carvahanes. These coffee houses, scattered throughout the empire from the grand bazaars of Constantinople to the modest quarters of provincial towns like Bursa or Edirne, serve as the unassuming heartbeats of Ottoman social life. Introduced in the 16th century from Yemen via the bustling ports of the Red Sea, coffee quickly became more than a beverage. It evolved into a cornerstone of daily existence, sanctioned by sultans like Suleiman the Magnificent and debated by ulama scholars who once pondered its virtues in the shadow of the Suleimani Mosque. Here, in these humble establishments, the ordinary Ottoman, be it a merchant weary from haggling over silk from the looms of Anatolia or a scribe fresh from transcribing imperial firmans, finds solace in the simple act of sipping, savouring, and slipping into the silences that bind conversation. You step through the low doorway of one such kahvehane, the air inside thick with the earthy aroma of freshly ground coffee beans, mingled with faint traces of tobacco from Nargile pipes and the subtle sweetness of rosewater sprinkled on the tiled floors to settle the dust. The room is modest, its walls adorned with faded kilims woven in geometric patterns reminiscent of Seljuk artistry, and shelves lined with brass trays that gleam dully in the light filtering through latticed windows. Patrons recline on low divans cushioned with pillows stuffed with wool from Cappadocian sheep, their kaftans draped loosely over crossed legs, embodying the relaxed etiquette prescribed in Ottoman conduct manuals. No grand imperial decrees echo here. Instead, the space hums with the understated rhythm of routine, a place where janissaries off duty might share tales of campaigns in the Balkans, or Armenian artisans from the millets discuss the latest guild regulations issued from the Sublime Porte. The ritual begins with the sezvi, that iconic copper pot with its long handle, a vessel as emblematic of Ottoman ingenuity as the aqueducts that carried water from distant springs to the city's fountains. The kahvechi, the coffee master, measures out the dark grounds, sourced from Mocha ports controlled by Ottoman governors. With a small wooden spoon, his movements deliberate and unhurried, much like the slow turning of pages in a manuscript from the Imperial Library. These grounds, finely pulverized in a mortar that echoes the pounding of drums in meta-military bands, are stirred into water simmering over a small charcoal brazier. The heat releases a fragrance that curls through the room, evoking the spice-laden caravans that traverse the empire's vast trade routes, from the camel trails of Arabia to the galleys plying the Mediterranean under the watchful eye of Barbarossa's naval successors. As the mixture bubbles gently, without boiling over, a skill honed through generations, the kahvechi adds sugar for those who request it order, medium sweet, balancing the coffee's inherent bitterness like the empire's own blend of stern governance and cultural tolerance. Cups are next, those delicate fincans shaped like tulips, a flower beloved in Ottoman gardens and poetry, symbolizing divine beauty since the days of Sultan Ahmed I made of fine porcelain from Iznik workshops, renowned for their blue and white tiles that adorn mosques like the Blue Mosque itself. Each cup is small, holding just a few sips to encourage mindful consumption rather than hasty gulps. The kahvechi pours the coffee with a practiced tilt, allowing a thin layer of foam to form at the top, a sign of quality much praised in the travelogues of Evliya Çelebi, the famed 17th century Ottoman explorer who chronicled such rituals across the empire's expanse. You receive your cup on a saucer, the porcelain warm against your palm, and settle into a corner divan, where the silence begins to weave its spell. The first sip is a revelation, bitter, robust, with grounds settling at the bottom like sediment in the Golden Horn's waters, carrying hints of the Yemeni highlands where coffee was first cultivated under Ottoman suzerainty. In this moment, the true essence of the coffee house emerges, the silence between talk. Conversations here are not constant barrages but ebb and flow like the tides of the Bosphorus, punctuated by pauses where men, and occasionally women in segregated sections, as per the social norms influenced by Hanafi jurisprudence, contemplate their words. A group nearby discusses the latest news from the divan, the Imperial Council, their voices low and measured, referencing edicts from Sultan Murad IV who once banned coffee houses fearing sedition, only for them to flourish again under his successors. One man, perhaps a dervish with a tasbih prayer bead strand in hand, speaks of Sufi poetry, quoting Yunus Emre's verses on unity and humility, his words trailing off into a thoughtful hush as others nod, sipping slowly. The silence that follows is profound, broken only by the faint clink of a cup returned to its saucer or the soft exhale of smoke from a nargile, its bubbles gurgling like a distant fountain in the Topkapi gardens. These pauses are sacred, allowing the mind to wander through the empire's vast tapestry, from the snow-capped peaks of the Taurus Mountains to the fertile plains of Thrace, where coffee houses served as way stations for travelers on the Egnatia Road, an ancient route revitalized under Ottoman rule. The grounds in your cup, now visible as the liquid diminishes, invite tasseography, the art of reading coffee sediments, a practice blending Persian mysticism with Ottoman folklore. A woman in the corner, veiled in a yashmak as per urban custom, might interpret the patterns for a small fee, her predictions drawing on tales from 1001 Nights, stories that circulated in coffeehouses since the days of Harun al-Rashid's caliphate, which influenced Ottoman literary traditions. As you drain the last drop, the bitterness lingers on your tongue, a reminder of life's dualities, pleasure and austerity, much like the empire's own history of conquest and cultural flowering. The kahveci collects the empty cups, rinsing them in a basin fed by water from the Valens aqueduct, an engineering marvel inherited from Roman times and maintained by Ottoman engineers. Conversations resume sporadically, touching on mundane matters, the price of wheat in the granaries controlled by the Sultan's viziers, or the latest caravan arrivals bearing news from Mecca, the spiritual heart of the empire since Suleiman's conquests. Yet it's the silences that define this ritual, offering respite in a world of constant motion. In these gaps, one might reflect on the empire's philosophical underpinnings, from Ibn Sina's treatises on medicine, once debated in these very halls, to the quiet wisdom of Mevlana Rumi, whose whirling dervishes performed in nearby texts. The coffee grounds, now drying in the cup's base, form abstract shapes, a crescent moon, perhaps, echoing the Ottoman flag, or a simple line, symbolizing the straight path of faith as outlined in the Quran, copies of which often grace the shelves here. Time stretches in the kahvehane, unmarked by the frantic ticks of clocks but by the slow burn of charcoal and the gradual emptying of pots. Patrons come and go, each leaving behind a trace, a dropped coin, a forgotten tasbih, or simply the warmth of their presence absorbed into the cushions. The air grows heavier with accumulated scents, the grounds and abandoned cups settling like forgotten memories, ready to be swept away and reborn in the next brew. As evening approaches, the light outside dims, and the kahvehane's lanterns flicker to life, their flames dancing like fireflies in the imperial gardens. The ritual persists, cups filled and emptied, grounds read and discarded, silences cherished amid the talk. In this ordinary corner of Ottoman life, far from the grandeur of the divan or the clamour of the battlefield, one finds a profound peace, a lullaby brewed in copper, savoured in porcelain, and lingered over in the quiet spaces that words cannot fill. The coffee house, with its unassuming rituals, mirrors the empire's soul, resilient, communal, and eternally patient. As you set down your empty cup, the silence envelops you once more, inviting your thoughts to drift, your eyelids to grow heavy, in this timeless haven of grounds and quietude. Twilight settles over the crooked lanes of 16th century Istanbul, staining the Bosphorus lilac and coaxing the first lamps to flicker alive above latticed windows. Inside a modest kahvehane tucked beside the spice bazaar, merchants and porters shake desert grit from their boots, then sink onto low divans upholstered in sun-faded kilim. The coals in a copper Mongol glow like pomegranate seeds, heating rows of battered sezvala whose tin linings smell faintly of cardamom. Across the narrow room the kahveci, fez tilted, sleeves rolled, moves with the solemn economy of a calligrapher. He measures Yemeni beans, pulverized between brass burrs, into the waiting pots, adds sugar, whispers a blessing, then lets the mixture rise 3 patient times before pouring. No music yet, only the punctuated hiss of water meeting metal and the papery shuffle of an Ottoman gazette being opened beneath the oil lamp. A scholar wearing an ink-blotched kaftan leans over polished walnut, reciting a fresh couplet of Fuseli. The garden of the heart needs coffee rain to flower. His friend, a gnarled boatman, answers with a grin, declaring that poetry tastes better when soaked in grounds. Conversations drift like scented smoke, weaving politics, love, grain prices, and last night's Galata tavern brawl into one endless tapestry. Yet the true ritual here is silence, the strangely weightless hush that settles after each deliberate sip. In that hush minds roam farther than caravans ever dared. Seated nearby, 3 janissaries, helmets at their feet, count the bubbles blooming atop their coffee, certain that odd numbers foretell victory in tomorrow's drill. Across from them, a Jewish silversmith sketches new filigree patterns, his parchment balanced on a bowl of rosewater locum. Next to the door, two Greek sea captains swap weather omens, tracing imagined squalls across the grain of the table. The Carvecchi returns, distributing refills without a word. Each porcelain fincan bears Iznik motifs, sapphire tulips, emerald vines, tiny crimson carnations that glow against the dark liquid inside. Lifting your own cup, you watch the foam tremble, then settle, leaving miniature constellations that invite interpretation. An old Armenian fortune teller notices your curiosity. She smiles, turns your cup upside down onto its saucer, and tells you to wait until the moon creeps past the minaret. Patience is another ingredient here, as necessary as water or flame. Outside, the ezan unfurls from Suleimanai's slender balconies, its vowels floating across tiled roofs like silk on evening air. The entire Carvajane pauses, cups halfway to mouths, eyes softening. When the call fades, talk resumes, but quieter, as though everyone feels freshly measured against eternity. A dervish, robe frayed from endless wandering, taps a tambourine, humming a Mevlevi hymn. He is not ignored. Coins appear beside his saucer, small acknowledgments that music, too, can sweeten bitterness. The hush thickens again as patrons read the leaves of their own thoughts. You recall the empire's invisible arteries, aqueducts by Sinan, caravan roads patrolled by Sipahis, the postal runners sprinting from Adyana to Damascus, and realize they all converge here, in miniature, within the porcelain rim of a single cup. Time itself seems soluble, dissolving like sugar stirred into dense brew. Stories from centuries earlier seep into present chatter. The siege of Vienna, the drowning of ships bearing Maccabees, the Sultan who disguised himself to judge baristas incognito. Laughter surfaces, bubbles, subsides. Your cup is finally cool enough to invert. You mimic the fortune teller's earlier gesture, turning porcelain onto saucer, then waiting, palms warming at their sides. Grounds ooze down the inner walls, forming maps impossible to reproduce. A crescent, maybe a cypress, perhaps a lone galley rowing toward bright waters. The Armenian woman returns, peering closely before announcing that travel, ink, and quiet victories await you. Her fee is your attention, nothing more. Overhead, lanterns bob as drafts sneak beneath the door, carrying scents of grilled mackerel from the waterfront. The scholar sighs, closes his notebook, and murmurs that even prophets cannot write after midnight. One by one patrons depart, fastening cloaks, settling debts with gestures rather than coins. The janissaries shoulder helmets, the silversmith pockets his sketches, and the boatman tests the chill beyond the threshold. Only you, the fortune teller, and the Carvecchi remain, sharing the gentle embarrassment of strangers caught in sudden intimacy. He extinguishes the Mongol, spreading coals across a brass tray so they die without smoke. Embers wink, ruby to ash, mirroring the slow cooling of the city's fever. From beyond the shutter, Galata's watchman strikes his wooden clapper, announcing the second watch. The Carvecchi presses a final cup into your hands, this one unsweetened, telling you that night conversations should end bitter to help the mind remember. You drink, noticing flavors unnoticed before: smoke, cedar, a phantom of citrus, the faint metallic echo of mortar and pestle. When the grounds settle, the cup reveals nothing but darkness, yet even that darkness feels instructive, a small, round reminder that absence can taste like possibility. The fortune teller leaves first, a silent shadow slipping through the crack of the door, carrying her own prophesies home inside a shawl. You linger, helping stack cups on wooden shelves scarred by decades of steaming porcelain. Each ring of residue seems a faint planetary orbit, proof that entire cosmoses can exist within a beverage the color of evening soil. The Carvecchi thanks you with a nod, then unties his apron, folding it like a prayer rug before slipping into the night. Stepping outside, you inhale air sharp with sea salt and chimney smoke. The streets are quiet, slick cobbles reflecting lantern halos like melted gold. Far away, A lone fisherman sings to keep the darkness company, his voice mingling with the muted clang of ship rigging. You realize that the taste of coffee still lingers, anchoring you to the present while inviting visions of distant deserts, starlit steppe roads, and cedar forests. The ritual will continue tomorrow, identical yet never the same, because every silence poured between words leaves a new sediment at the bottom of the cup. Walk home, but keep the final swallow of bitterness resting on your tongue. Let it remind you that history is brewed slowly, strained through patience, sweetened by fellowship, and finally read in the quiet patterns left behind. In those patterns lie empires, revolutions, marriages, betrayals, and dreams. They wait for anyone willing to pause long enough to see. Perhaps tomorrow you will sit again beneath the smoke-dark rafters, trade coins for conversation, and watch fresh ground spiral through boiling water, repeating a rite older than any sultan. Until then, carry the memory of lilac twilight, of porcelain constellations, of silence that speaks, and of coffee strong enough to steady the restless heart. These are the things empires cannot tax, thieves cannot steal, and time cannot dilute. They are brewed, shared, forgotten, then brewed again. Some night, years from now, a stranger you will never meet may lift a cup in this very room, taste the same bittersweet bloom, and feel inexplicably welcome, as though friends are whispering just beyond audible range. That is the quiet miracle of coffee houses. They ferment communion without command, need strangers into comrades, and trade loneliness for a single, fragile warmth. The city may swell, walls may crumble, dynasties may unravel, but so long as embers glow beneath a copper pot, conversation will rise like steam, and silence will settle like grounds, inviting anyone awake enough to listen. Tonight, walking alone past shuttered stalls, you cradle that fragile warmth between your ribs, letting it pulse with each step. The harbour mists wrap the shoreline, blurring ships into smoky silhouettes. Gulls cry once, then roost on dark rigging. You think of the fortune-teller's words, travel, ink, quiet victories, and realize each is already unfolding, here, now, in the simple act of walking home through history's half-lit streets. When you reach your doorway, moonlight silvering the threshold, you pause, exhale, and taste coffee's lingering ghost. It is both promise and memory, a small nocturnal talisman assuring you that tomorrow's counsel, tomorrow's warmth, tomorrow's silence already waits inside a battered copper pot. Close the door, let night finish its slow descent, and dream of steam, porcelain, and lilac-tinted dawn. Beyond sleep, the city continues its own subdued brewing. Fishermen knot lines, scribes sharpen reeds, bakers stoke hidden fires, and somewhere deep in the palace, a restless sultan consults astrologers about tomorrow's omens. All await sunrise, when cup meets lip again and the hush between sentences renews its gentle dominion. Dawn finally arrives, slipping pearl-pink light over tiled domes, and the Carvahane's door groans open. You wake, dress, and return, drawn by the remembered aroma that seems woven into the morning breeze. Inside, fresh embers glow, and cups glint like dew-covered magnolia petals. A new crowd assembles. Apprentices trone from the tanneries, diplomats nursing secrets, women from the nearby bathhouse wrapped in lavender scarves, each finding refuge in the steam-softened air. The Carvachi's grandson, barely 12, balances trays with nervous pride, initiating himself into a lineage older than muskets or banknotes. He spills a drop, blushes, then is forgiven with a pat from a visiting poet who knows that every craft begins with trembling hands. Across the room, an Italian merchant, charting freight to Alexandria, offers cinnamon shavings as payment for translation help. Within minutes, the spice perfumes the pot, marrying with cardamom in a union equal parts Levant and Mediterranean. You notice how the hush adjusts itself, softer than last night, because morning requires gentler pauses to allow dreams safe passage out the door. Someone begins reading aloud news of a new astronomical observatory ordered by Taqi al-Din. Listeners murmur, envisioning fiery spheres charted with brass quadrant and patient ink. In that reverie the coffee cools, unnoticed. A pigeon flutters inside, circles beams, then settles atop a hookah like an improvised gargoyle. Nobody shoos it away. All creatures, feathered or footsore, are welcome so long as they respect the hush. Between sips, a tailor snips patterns from newsprint, dreaming of coats for children not yet born. Nearby, a midwife knots string over her wrist, counting heartbeats remembered from last night's delivery. Even these private labours fold into the communal brew, steeping patience into the air. You finish your cup, carry it to the counter, and thank the young apprentice. His smile glints, the candle behind him turning his eyes to twin chips of obsidian. Pocketing your notebook, you step into blazing daylight, streets already thick with hawkers selling simmet, oranges, and hand-painted tiles. Yet beneath the bustle you sense the same hush, thinned by sunlight but still audible in the pause between a vendor's call and a buyer's answer. You realize the Carvajal has no walls. Its ritual seeps outward, coating cobblestones, perfuming laundry lines, and echoing through bureaucrats queuing at the Divanai Humayan. Even pigeons on the palace roof carry some trace of roasted bean in their feathers. You walk on, content to let the day unfold, knowing that when twilight slips lilac over the Bosphorus once more, the lamps will ignite, the coals will glow, and the hush will gather itself again, ready to cradle fresh stories in the curve of each porcelain cup. Until then, every breath you draw carries a faint warmth, every heartbeat a gentle clink of ceramic, reminding you that silence is never empty, it is simply waiting to be poured. Whenever you feel adrift, close your eyes, inhale, and you will taste faint cardamom, smoky ember, and the promise of gathered voices resting between words. Open your eyes, face the world, and remember, you carry a coffee house within you, its silence, its stories, its bitter finish, and its lingering sweetness. That is enough to keep you warm through storms, enough to welcome any stranger, enough to fill unwritten pages with steady ink. So step forward, and let your day begin like fresh grounds meeting water, hissing, swirling, rising, then settling into something quietly profound. When night falls again, return to the cup, honor the hush, and read whatever constellation forms at the bottom. For now, walk on, heartbeat echoing like drums, guided by coffee-scented wind. The hinge of night swings wider, and the city exhales. From the slope just below Suleimanai, the roofs run like tarnished scales toward the Golden Horn, every tile storing a thimble of moonlight. The Carvajal where the last coal's gutted has closed its eye, yet the ritual, stubborn, soft-footed, walks with anyone who learned its weight and quiet. Evening's final murmurs still cling to sleeves and hair, to the breath that fogs an inner pain when one bends to blow out a lamp. The cups are washed, the brazier cooled. Still, the hush between words persists like the aftertaste of cardamom, something sweet and bitter left to keep company with the dark. Step back into the street the ritual owns as though it were a long hallway between two sleeps. The cobbles glisten from a faint mist rolling up from the horn. A porter passes, bent under the little mountain of his back basket, walking as if born to climb. Somewhere near the Galata Bridge, a watch drum taps the hour. Tock, tock tock, tock. From a postern door a bathhouse matron carries out ash to feed the street's hunger, shaking it into the night like grey confetti. The scent of charcoal mixes with the ghost of roasted beans. The two become indistinguishable as thought turns toward the next morning's first brew. Overhead, a lamp on a chain sways and writes half-circles of gold on the slick stones, steadying each time the wind steadies. At the corner where a fountain whispers into a marble basin, one endowed long ago by a sultana whose name is worn down to a sigh, sit two bench boards, bowed by use, empty only because the hour has taught them modesty. Here, silence takes the shape of an unshared cup. What you would have said to an old friend, what a friend might have said back, steeping now in the warmth under your ribs. The city's multiplicity filters into this gap. A Greek grocer counting figs with his thumbnail, a Kurdish dyer's hand stained blue as the Bosphorus at dawn, a Sephardi peddler with cinnamon on his tongue, a Bosnian mason whose pockets cradle chalk like sleepy sparrows. Ottoman, all, in the way the empire is a braid that holds even when one strand thins. Above the fountain niche, Calligraphy flows like a river cutting through green stone. No decree, just a prayer for travelers and those who pour water for strangers. An old wax plaque promising a mercy more durable than brick. You read without reading, as one does when the eye already knows the path of line and flourish. Then you sit, and the mind lowers its scaffold, plank by plank. The quiet of the coffee house spills from the tucked-in lane into the square, spreads under market canopies stacked like folded wings. Even the cats have learned to place their paws where noise is least. From the far side of the square drifts a story in pieces, gathered by the wind as it passes the shutter of the barber's, the locksmith's joists, the spy shop with its green pyramids of crushed mint. Ameda, one of the city's old storytellers, finishes his late show in a doorway lit by a soot-stained lamp. He bows, touches his forehead, lips, and chest, and pockets 2 copper coins with a flourish meant to make poverty look like a trick of light. The tale, the cardie fooled by his own reflection, the prince who learned humility from a fisherman's rope, will join tomorrow's conversation the way a pinch of mastic joins coffee, invisible afterward, but necessary to its particular mouth-feel. Only a few steps and the lane opens onto a small square where a plane tree lifts its black net of branches against the moon. The trunk is bandaged with handbills about a lost goat, about the price of wool, about a travelling troupe playing shadows on silk. From a second-floor window a ney unfurls a phrase, 3 notes, then 5, as if the instrument were teaching the night the grammar of longing. You stop, because silence asks something of you, and because coffee taught you to recognize at hand. The song is not long. When it ends, the air keeps the shape of it, and you walk on through that shape. On the hill above, Topkap warms itself with its own memories. Kitchens larger than churches cool in the careful order of brass and copper and iron. 100 spoons rest as if asleep. In the library, a lamp left burning under an astronomer's chart makes the ecliptic look like a path across water. Within the harem, breath moves softly from room to room, an invisible loom weaving nights into years. Somewhere in those deep precincts a scribe closes the day's last ledger, almonds, sugar, citron peel, pepper, and dips his pen to draw a flourish as tidy as a final sip. Even here, ritual is a seam that does not show, but keeps cloth from parting. Above Kukuk Bazaar, a loft window frames 3 silhouettes around a brazier no bigger than a dinner plate. They lean in like conspirators. Laughter climbs out without a ladder, quick and wicked, and falls back as soot. A youth inside learns the art of lifting the pot at the first swell and lowering it just at the cusp of spillage, so that foam may rise again. His teacher's palm rests on his wrist with a pressure small enough to be mistaken for affection. Maybe they are kin. Maybe they are only fellows of heat and bean. In this city a method can travel as surely as a rumour, entering 100 kitchens, becoming a thing grandmothers correct with a click of the tongue. Another Carvahane, not yours, but a cousin, has not yet closed. It sits under the eaves of the silk dealer's han, its shutters half-latched in the way a good eyelid lets itself drowse and then remembers one more story. Inside, a tray stands like a copper moon on a shelf. Cups arranged on it ring brighter than they look. At the nearest table, a bookbinder raises a finger and the men around him fall quiet. He speaks of a page he repaired that day from a chronicle of Mehmed's siege. How ink migrates in damp, how letters tire, how margins can rescue text when the body of a thing fades. They listen as if he had poured coffee into their ears. He does not mention that he wept a little bending over the torn place. He says only, "It lives again." They nod in a way that leaves room for salt. Below this light, the shadows look like velvet turned by hand. Someone has brought a lemon, someone else a sprig of mint pinched from a neighbour's pot, both cradled lightly as contraband. The Kavachi accepts their offerings with a solemnity that belongs to good priests and good surgeons, to steward what has been entrusted without asking names. He makes the last pot of the night with no sugar, for men already sweetened by story. The silence after that final pour holds a different weight. It is not the speechless or that follows prayer, nor the mental hush before the first page, nor the ache left when laughter burns out. It is a civilian quiet, made of small responsibilities fulfilled, fathers who will carry sleeping children up stairways whose steps remember their feet, widows who will bank the stove with a skill that looks like love, students folding the edge of a page so they can find their place before dawn. The empire has armies, has penknives, has taxes measured by harvest and moth, but this is how it maintains itself: milked cows, swept thresholds, cups rinsed with care, the pause that allows another to speak. Walk east. The streets are no longer compartments but corridors. You pass a closed door and taste anise from a pastilla dissolved in someone's mouth. You pass a gate and smell juniper because a man poured his boredom into his pipe. The quiet now wears boots. The patrol rounds its corner, a cluster of lanterns, slow as saints, bright as the devil. Their commander nods once, because your posture offends no ordinance and your gaze holds nothing like theft. They pass, their leather leaving small memos in the air. The night's cold tightens with the river breeze. You tuck your hands into your sleeves and cross a bridge older than your worry. The boards give a little under your step. Every nail knows it is iron. To your right, a fisherman mutters a proverb to the fish, as if apology worked better than bait. On the far bank, Galata's houses climb a hill like bees onto honeycomb. Their windows blink one by one. A dog debates itself in an alley. Even here, in neighborhoods that once pretended the Ottoman was not its name, the hush drifts and thickens, immune to partisan speeches, older than the exchange of treaties. On your way down you pass a wooden house whose balcony sags into charm. A woman sits under a shawl, rocking nothing in her arms, singing to the child who will be back from sleep soon. She has left a cup in the window niche to cool. When she tastes it, the coffee will be lukewarm, which is preferable for sorrow. No one names this rule. All observe it. Her voice drifts down like thin silk and drapes itself over the hydrangea bushes white with moon. Near the lower market, a row of stalls wears darkness like a borrowed coat. A lantern still burns inside the pickle seller shop. His jars hold the day's last light in slices: cucumber, beet, cauliflower, pepper. Vinegar sharpens the air until even your thoughts stand straighter. He lifts a cup, tea this time, sharp as counsel, and salutes you with a tilt. You return the gesture, and both of you accept the transaction. Recognition, no words. Between you two, an entire etiquette unfurls and refurls without creasing. A clock strikes, then repents with a small clatter. Dogs negotiate the night's jurisdiction with diplomacy that would shame men. From a school's courtyard rises the smell of ink, of slate dust, of benches rubbed smooth by small ambitions. And beyond, from a hospice maintained by a guild's endowment, a gentle bustle signals the hour of broth. Thin as charity, hot as mercy, it will travel from bowl to hand to stomach without making a speech. A novice carries 2 bowls and does not slosh a drop. Outside, he rinses the ladle 3 times. Rituals that do not announce themselves work the deepest repairs. At the horn's edge, a boat rocks against its rope like a sheep against a good fence. A man lying under his cloak on the deck dreams he is awake counting stars, though in the dream his eyes are closed. The rope knows it's not. The cleat remembers the hand that taught it how to believe. You stand just long enough to realize that the water's sound is not water but the hull reading the river aloud. Then you go, because even reverie requires a gate. Your own alley at last. Your own door. A key that looks like a small iron fish. Inside, the house smells of boiled linen and stale bread, which is to say of being cared for and being hungry in the right proportions. On the shelf, the jar of coffee waits its modest turn, beans as dark as figs in shadow. You set water to heat, because sleep attaches more willingly to a house that expects it and knows how to court it without pleading. The spoon you choose is nicked at the edge. You prefer it because it does not pretend to be new. When the water quivers, you add the grounds like night added to night. The pot swells toward a small emergency, and you rescue it with the old practice tilt. Foam rises, gentle as a kept promise. The room learns the smell even though it already knew it. A scent like a seamstress's thread passed through beeswax, like cedar rubbed with citrus, like the inside of a walnut. You pour, and the thin gold line of liquid belongs to no one but the hour. The cup kisses the saucer with the small sound lovers use when others might be listening. You lift and drink, and the taste announces once again what it has always announced. You live in a place where bitterness furnishes sweetness with a frame sturdy enough to hang its weight. The silence after your own last sip is different from the Carvahane's hush, but related the way cousins are. This one counts linens and blessings, considers small repairs, makes a note in a mind's ledger to mend a hinge, to copper a pan, to buy parsley at dawn. It expands across the room until it is something you could lean against without falling through. On the saucer, a coin of foam thins and winks out. You put your finger into the cup and tip it twice, the way your grandmother taught you to instruct luck to choose your pocket. Before bed you open the shutter to air out thought. The alley has become what alleys become at such hours. A seam holding two bolts of fabric together, night and night. A cat sits on the lintel across, tail wrapped as neatly as a turban. It considers you until you are blessed. Somewhere, someone coughs once, then remembers that lungs prefer not to. You withdraw, lower the bar, blow the lamp. Sleep comes, but it behaves like coffee, arrives as warmth in the hands first, then in the chest, then in the head where it loosens knots that would not yield to knives. You sleep the kind of sleep in which you are also awake in another place. A room with blue tile, low voices, cups, a brazier with coals like pomegranate seeds. In that room you are both host and guest, both fortune-teller and the one who wants to be told, both janissary and boatman, both poet and porter. You pour for each and are poured for by each. When you wake, it is still night but later. The air cooled away a melody cools after the nay puts down its breath. You turn, accept the pillow's counsel, and let the second brew of sleep take. Toward morning the city remembers how to be a bellows. Doors begin to think of opening. Dogs fold their dreams and file them. Bread ovens lay down a river of scent along every alley. Each loaf a small boat carrying warmth to a pair of hands that has earned it. The first azan lifts as if from the lip of a cup, spills into the streets, and makes the stones glisten in their own hearing. Somewhere, with the care of one who has been taught correctly, a boy sweeps a threshold in strokes that do not wake the dreaming beans in their jar within. When you open your door, dawn is not yet gold so much as pewter, then pewter with milk, then milk with a thread of honey. The ritual you carried all night folds itself into the city's larger one as neatly as a napkin under a spoon. You head toward the same small room you left hours earlier, the place with its clean cups stacked like white coins, its tray shining with a matter-of-factness that feels like piety. You know already who will be there before you see them, the scholar with ink damp on his thumb, the silversmith with a new curl in his sketch, the boatman with hands that smell of river and rope, the Carvachi whose eye measures the water as if it were time itself. You do not hurry. Coffee in this city is never where you are going. It is how you are going. Each step is a stir, each breath a rise, each pause the settling of ground so that something can be read. And when you push open the door and the bell above gives its small note, neither boast nor apology, you step over the threshold into a room arranged to receive the day the way a cup receives what is poured, without argument, but ready to add its own shape. A tray passes, a cup weighs your palm, foam touches the lip with a whisper that could be your name. The hush is already laid like a clean cloth. Conversation places itself gently upon it. You sit. You lift. You sip. The bitterness frames the sweetness again. You listen to what is said, and to what is not, and to the space between, which is the oldest part of speech. And when someone asks the question that opens the morning's work, what did the night teach you? You answer in the only truthful way this ritual allows. You tilt your cup, you show the pattern the grounds made as the city slept, and you wait for a friend to read it aloud in words made simple by steam. Outside, light discovers the tiles. The empire wakes not by decree but by cups. Grounds settle, silence returns, and talk gathers itself like a river thinking of the sea. The ritual goes on, cups, grounds, silence between talk, and in that measured cycle the city learns, again and again, how to be gentle to itself. Morning is still polite when it reaches the bathhouse courtyard, brushing the lattice shadows from the plane tree onto a square of pale stone. The city hums beyond the wall, donkey bells, bread vendors, a distant smith tapping iron into cooperation. But inside the gate the sound changes, as if someone has swept speech into neat piles and left only the low music of water. A fountain threads silver into a marble basin. On the lintel above the entrance a carved inscription thanks the unnamed donor whose endowment keeps water hot and entry cheap. That private generosity, waqf money woven into steam, has turned this building into a quiet machine for returning people to themselves. You step under the arch and into the first chamber, a high hall with wooden galleries and windows like half-closed eyes. Sun filters through coloured glass and lands in squares on the floor, soft as folded towels. This is the place where shoes come off and errands let go. The keeper at the desk doesn't look up from his ledger. He already knows who has come by foot and who rolled here on wheels, who carries fatigue like a second coat and who carries news like an extra coin. He slides a key across polished wood and nods toward a small wooden booth along the wall. The booth is a swallow's nest of a room. Just a bench, a peg, a brass bowl. You hang your clothes, wrap yourself in a striped towel, and feel the morning step closer. From the galleries above, quiet conversation falls like light. Two friends discuss grain prices in a tone that could belong to glances as easily as to words. An old man counts the names of neighbours who have moved away and the names of aches that have moved in. A boy in a porter's belt laughs after failing to tie his towel and is forgiven by the room's soft heat. The attendant lifts a stack of towels as easily as a baker lifts loaves. He leads you through a short corridor where the air grows warm and fragrant. Somewhere close, a copper cauldron hums on an unseen fire, and a hidden network of channels carries hot water under the floor. The architect knew how to instruct stone to give back warmth the way a friend gives back a book, gratefully, with a thumb pressed to the place where they paused. The next door opens and the warm room takes you to its chest. Marble holds a long memory of heat. It gives it to your feet with the unhurried confidence of old wealth. Along the walls small niches cradle brass bowls and bars of soap the colour of olive leaves. The air smells of wood smoke, clean linen, and that special note hot water gains when it has passed through stone. In the corners, basins fill and overflow in patient circles. A young attendant cups the water by hand, testing its temper, then adjusts it with a twist of a hidden valve. He learned that gesture from his father and will teach it to his nephew, a quiet lineage as reliable as a calendar. You sit on a low platform. Heat settles on your shoulders, slides down your back, and persuades your thoughts to uncurl. Morning's lists dissolve like sugar. The marble under your calves has been polished by thousands of mornings. It is kinder than most pillows and more honest than most chairs. The attendant brings a copper bowl of warm water and tips it across your shoulders in a curve so neat that the splash seems written. He returns the bowl to its niche, and you begin the ordinary rite each bathe the nose. Wet hands, wet face, the slow press of palms along arms and legs, the way you might dust a bookshelf you love. Here the city unlaces itself. A carpenter who started the day with splinters in his fingers and sawdust in his lungs now breathes clean heat. A mother, stern with the morning's necessary orders, lets the towel loosen and remembers singing while shelling beans years ago. A scribe who collects men's words for a living sets them down and listens to water shifting in basins like someone turning a page. The bathhouse is not a place apart from life. It's the hinge that lets life open smoothly. Now the movement turns from warmth to work. An attendant with a loofah glove, the kase, approaches and shows it to you with a little bow, a gesture that says both "may I" and "trust me." You lie back on the warm platform. The marble owns your weight without complaint. The dome overhead brings your breath back to you a heartbeat late. The first pass of the glove startles, then persuades. It is thorough without rudeness, brisk without haste. The glove finds old, grey layers that no mirror can scold and frees them from you without accusation. They roll away along your skin like the tired peel of last season's fruit. You watch the small scrolls curl, a parade of what you carried unknowingly. The attendant rinses the glove in a basin, rings it so sharply the sound snaps, then continues. He turns your arm, lifts your shoulder, draws long paths along your back that feel like the memory of a river. It is an honest labor. He is neither servant nor friend, but something steady between the roles, a keeper of thresholds. Around you others submit to the same quiet abrasion. No one apologizes for the change in their color. No one boasts. It is understood that the skin we present to the world is not the only one we own. Rinse. The word is simple. The feeling is choir. Warm water solves down your chest and legs, and the heat has an aftertaste, like honey passing over a faint bitterness that helps you tell sweetness from sweetness. Your mind, which habitually grows thorns, sits for a moment like a well-pruned rosebush, ready to leaf out without catching sleeves. The attendant nods toward a low stool near a basin. You move there, and he brings a cloth bag and a bar of soap. He rubs the bag against the soap until the cloth swells with foam, then milks it into clouds. He scoops those clouds with his hands and lets them fall across your shoulders and arms and neck until you wear a soft armor. The bag returns to the soap, gathers more weather, returns to your chest. For a minute you live under a sky that fits. A steward passes carrying cups set in a wrought tray. The cups ring once, a faint silver note that remembers the bell above the coffeehouse door, and then become decorous again. He offers one to the old man on the end bench. The old man declines with a tilt of the head and the kind of smile that says later, thank you without words. On the wall, an inscription in flowered script notes the name of the architect, known for teaching domes to hear secrets and not repeat them. Above it, a star-shaped vent explains how heat leaves without stealing comfort. In the next alcove a woman combs the hair of her daughter, careful and slow, the comb moving like a boat through dark water. They speak softly about school, about the cat's new habit of sleeping among the onions, about a dream where the house learned to walk. The comb reaches the end of each pass, rests, returns, rests. Between those gentle stops and starts, a life briefly turns weightless and remains so long enough to be remembered intact. Elsewhere, a travelling merchant knocks his head on the wisdom that sometimes arrives exactly when posture loosens. He has learned the hard way that profit bought with scowls leaks out faster than it arrived. He has decided to do today's deals patient and precise. He dries his hands, folds his towel, and nods to a stranger. The nod is almost a bow, nothing dramatic, just enough to let the day pass through it without snagging. After rest, scent. An attendant produces a small bottle whose glass is the color of amber. He warms a few drops in his palm and smooths them over your forearms. The oil smells of lemon peel and something bitter green, a recipe carried here in the sacks of sea traders and improved by people who will never meet them. He rubs more oil into your shoulders, loosening a knot your sleep could not find. The gentle pressure points belong to an old map passed from hand to hand inside the guild. He moves with the gravity of someone who knows that mastery is not the same as hurry. When he's done, he wipes the extra oil from his hands with a towel that has 5 perfect threads loose at one corner. He will fix them later. He will remember because he cares about corners. You rinse light once more to persuade the oil to go where you live instead of where you sit. Then he brings a dry towel, the fabric coarse enough to wake the skin, soft enough to invite it, and wraps you as if the towel were a sentence that wanted to end in kindness. You sit again and watch the room at work, old heat calming the young hands honoring the old, water and stone and breath giving the same quiet lesson. The bathhouse keeps a small ledger of vows made in steam. Not the big oaths declared to banners or judges or crowds. The small ones whispered to yourself with a wet back and a clear breath. Today, speak more slowly. Cut bread with the dull knife first. Listen all the way to the end of the sentence you didn't begin. Fold your coat even when no one will see the hook. Pay the tobacco seller back before he asks again. These are the changes that matter because they are possible and because they will be tested by other people's quick tempers and your own old habits. The bathhouse cannot keep you from breaking them. It can only send you out with your hands warm enough to try. Through a small door, an attendant slips into the furnace chamber to feed the hidden fire. The room receives him with an orange ear. He returns with a sheen of work on his forearms and an expression borrowed from the mason who taught him how to be owed loyalty by stone. His route through the warm room is the same every hour. He moves the same bowls to the same niches, turns the same taps the same quarter, picks up the same strand of hair from the same corner. He is not bored. Repetition is where he practices grace. You think of the other buildings where heat and quiet teach similar but sterner lessons. The mosque where lines of shoulders meet like teeth well cut. The hospital where clean hands and clean cloth and clean intention save lives without noise. The kitchens of a palace where masters of water and fire cook comfort for those who will never learn their names. The city is full of places where skill wears humility like an apron. The bathhouse is one of them, and you are grateful to be its student for an hour. The last rinse is always a little sad. Water that has known air and stone and skin gives you a goodbye kiss and goes away without forwarding address. You stand and feel the towel's weight settle, the acceptable gravity of return. In the first chamber again, you sit under the soft draft of the gallery, and an attendant brings tea. Not the jolt of a trading dock, but the humble steam of leaves that remember hills. The saucer is warm where the cup's belly rests. The heat ring left when you lift the cup will fade before your towel dries. Still, it delights, and that delight keeps you faithful to here and now. The keeper at the desk inks a small mark in his ledger and rests the pen horizontal. He doesn't need to look up to tell you which shelf holds your booth key. His hand simply knows where your hand will be. You return the towel, fold it in half when you do, and though it is no one's rule you press the fold with your palm, because someone else will touch this towel later, and that someone else is the person you hope the city will make you ready to love when chance throws you toward them. In your booth, the world waits folded. The first sound your clothes make as you lift them is always the same, paper thin, like a sparrow correcting its course. Fabric picks up the faint memory of lemon and olive. Your belt cinches you into your field again. Errands, letters, the way money never quite fits the list you wrote. But the marble heat remains in your bones in a way that makes problem and solution look like two halves of the same coin, waiting to be flipped fairly. Back in the courtyard, the plane tree has moved its shade one tile to the left. A cat lounges along the lip of the fountain, tail so exact it could be used as a ruler. A boy flicks water from his fingers at the cat. The cat debates forgiveness and decides on professionalism. You adjust your collar, step out into the street, and begin walking the way the morning requires, through the short lane where shadow always smells like dill, past the fabric seller who hangs his bolts in a cascade that makes you think of waterfalls you have never seen, across a narrow square where a man repairs a sieve with a patience that feels like prayer. Heat follows you out and turns thin, then delicate, then memory. In the day, it will be called patience, or mercy, or attentiveness. You pass a baker's mouth of an oven. The afternoon breads are practicing the art of being ready exactly when someone steps through the door with coins and hunger. A municipal fountain glitters in a little burst of courage and then subsides at once. Someone greets someone else twice, once for manners, once for affection. You nod at the boy selling rose water, though you do not stop. The bottle clinks against its siblings like polite cousins. At the corner, the coffeehouse door is propped open with a carved block. Steam from the kettle and cool air from the street meet in a treaty. You look in, not to drink but to breathe a syllable of that other ritual and compare its temperament to the bathhouses. The coals glow. The cups wait like little moons. A group of men argue about the price of silk with the passionate courtesy this city reserves for ideas that have not hurt anyone yet. You smile, and the keeper behind the counter sees the smile and nods a blessing as easy as pouring. A grocer's stall with herbs stacked into pyramids like small hills in a toy country. A cobbler who likes his all too much to treat it like a tool. The street bends and unbends. At the far end of the row, where the stones grow older, you pass a small door with a brass plate, the office of the Bathhouse Foundation. The clerk inside boils tea, sharpens a reed pen, fills the day's receipts, and sends a letter to a mason to repair a hairline crack no one else would see. The building is a body. The clerk is its quiet doctor. The day is its steady pulse. By noon the sun will argue with the marble, and the marble will smile and say, "We have done this before." By afternoon the warm room will fill with men and women who have earned the right to become lighter. By evening the final basins will be rinsed 3 times, the floors squeegeed like a language remembered before bed, the furnace given its last meal of wood. The door will close. The plane tree will retell the story of shade to the tiles. Night will climb, and you will sleep under a roof that has learned a little from domes, how to listen to rain without interrupting. Tomorrow the routine will repeat not because the city lacks imagination, but because mastery loves repetition the way skin loves warmth. Towels will be folded again, marble warmed again, soap bag filled with clouds again. New aches will arrive at the door, looking for an old cure. New vows will form in old steam. Someone will forgive someone else sooner. Someone will pay a debt before it grows teeth. An apprentice will lean less heavily on a gesture and more deeply into its meaning. A child will learn that hot water and a gentle hand can accomplish what scolding cannot. These winds are small enough to fit in a brass cup and heavy enough to bend the day toward good. And you, already half a citizen of steam, will find your way back when your temper shortens or your shoulders knot or your errands start speaking to you in a voice you do not respect. The bathhouse does not scold. It does not forget. It is not a miracle. It is a practice made of 1,000 small obediences to warmth and water and care. You go there not to become someone else, but to become the person you promised in a simpler hour to be. As you turn toward the market, the city rehearses its favorite chord. Cartwheel on stone, child shout, kettle hiss, gossip's feathered footfall. The bathhouse remains behind you like a letter you carry in your pocket even after you have memorized it. Its paragraphs were warmth, scrubbing, foam, rest, tea. Its moral was plain and old. Remove what does not belong, soften what is hardened, rinse, and begin again. The city agrees. So do you. And with that quiet agreement, towels, marble warmth, soap paths, and the unhurried promise of return. You take the next corner lightly, already cleaner than your clothes can show. By noon, the street unspools like a ribbon of decisions, each stall a small vote for continuity. The bathhouse remains behind, yet not behind exactly. Heat lingers as a permission in the joints. The skin feels like a door freshly oiled. The city's noises take their seats again. A cartwheel arguing gently with stone, a stitch of gossip mended in a doorway, a kettle requesting patience. The towel's memory has gone, but the manner it taught remains, like a rule murmured softly. Begin clean, proceed kindly, rinse whatever hardens before sleep. Beyond the corner, a slope lifts toward the high quarter where domes crown the day's thought. If the morning had a center, it would be here, where warmth travels from marble to mind and back again. The bathhouse stands with its modest face to the street, a plain tree casting dapple onto the lintel. Children hop from light to shade as if learning an alphabet only their feet can read. A cat ferries itself along the fountain edge, tail steady as a tightrope walker. Up the hill, the profile of Suleimani holds itself like a hand raised to bless the breeze. Sinan once taught stone how to listen. The bathhouses, Valens to one side, Kalalu toward the press of the book market, the old Sembolitas closer to the spine of the city, learned too, to gather people without crowding them, to keep heat from scalding, to make quiet robust enough to share. Inside, the day shifts from solitary to communal. Early bathers have gone to errands. The noontide belongs to guilds, neighbours, travellers who leave their dialects on the tiles and pick up the common language of steam. The keeper marks entries in his ledger with a pen that writes better after it has warmed in his fingers. An apprentice, barefoot, careful, carries fresh towels to the upper galleries, every step a stitch in a fabric broader than cloth. A mason leans his back against the warm platform's edge and feels the marble return its stored sun. A spice seller, hands stained the colour of paprika, cups water and lets it brim over his knuckles. A scribe closes his eyes while the loofah glove writes long sentences along his shoulders. commas along the ribs, a quiet period at the base of the neck. This is a place where the city remembers how to be native to itself. The door takes a coin. The wakf takes the role of a patient aunt, funding heat, soap, repair, so that the poorest can afford to gather their breath. A piece of brassware is mended before it cracks. A hairline fissure in the dome is taught to forget itself under a craftsman's whisper. Even the buckets learn humility, standing just so beneath a spout, waiting their turn with the grace of a well-schooled child. The movement repeats, but never idles. Warmth, rinse, scrub, foam, rest, an alphabet of relief, every letter useful. An attendant lifts the soap bag, squeezes weather out of it, and drapes the sky over a carpenter's chest. The foam makes small mountains, valleys, then melts. A pilot from the Bosphorus, palms inked by rope, lets his fingers open like an anchor rope paying out, and tells a boy about the way currents braid under Galata Bridge. The boy doesn't speak. He nods as if the water has grown a voice under the dome. A grandmother shows her granddaughter how to wring the cloth once, twice, then let it rest. Wrists learn economy, eyes learn softness. These are teachable waters. They remember to be hot without bullying, cool without complaint. In the warm room, time is measured differently. Not by the sun's slide across the fountain tiles, but by the sequence of comforts. The first hand pour across the shoulders, the first tug of the glove, the second foam, the last rinse, the tea. You glance up. A star-shaped vent in the dome makes noon look like an ink drop falling through milk. The sound changes as the room fills. Water prints on marble, cups kiss saucers, a towel sighs into its fold. A stranger clears his throat, and even that carries a gentleness recently acquired. Somewhere along the line, the bathhouse becomes more than water and stone. It becomes a transaction with the self that does not require witness. Men who argued loudly in the coffeehouse an hour ago now let heat complicate their opinions in the best way, softening the edges, making space where declarations were. A porter, who spent the morning negotiating with stairs, lets the platform negotiate with his back. His breath arrives in fours, then threes, then tours. In a corner alcove, two tailors plot a new cut for a sleeve and decide to try on themselves before they try it on a customer. Good habits are the fastest contagion here. The keeper's assistant moves through the khamkhan with a tray, the cups clinking like small bells that have learned to be modest. He serves tea to the men whose towels have already dried in patches, to the women whose hair is plaited and shining, to the stranger who doesn't yet know how to accept a cup with the right amount of gratitude. He'll learn. The tray passes. The room's temperature rises by one smile. In the furnace room, the heart you don't see, a man whose name never appears on ledgers learns the personality of wood. Each log is an argument in a dialect of heat. Some persuade, some harangue, some whisper and are more convincing for it. He feeds them all with intervals learned from someone who learned them from someone else, and the water answers in steady temper. The bathhouse's real miracle is not heat, it's cadence. By mid-afternoon, the clientele rearranges itself again. A cluster of scholars from the Medries slips in between lessons. Their debate on a pause that feels less like a stop and more like a quarter rest. One of them brings a thin book in a cloth wrapper and leaves it along the warm wall, knowing the cloth will hold the page open without breaking the spine. A baker arrives with flour in the fold of his forearm, which the water will lift like a curtain to reveal skin he still remembers from childhood. A soldier steps carefully around puddles as if they were unexploded decisions. A fruit seller leaves a coin on the keeper's desk and a fig beside it. The coin buys entry. The fig buys a small story later about a summer too sweet to waste. An attendant demonstrates the old trick of lifting the soap bag high and letting the foam fall into a net exactly where a knotted back asks for it. He uses oil that remembers lemon and laurel, palms that have memorized joints and their stubbornness. He speaks little, but he reads much, shoulders, scowls, the angles of jawlines that tell the tale of nights too full of thought. He is a quiet empiricist. Try heat, then pressure, then stretch, then rest, then rinse, then tea. Most complications respond to this sequence. The ones that don't are filed under tomorrow, which the bathhouse stocks generously. Some bathhouses have VIP stories. This one holds common ones with equal ceremony. Still, the city loves to circulate names. Mehmed once walked in here with books under his arm, they say, seen and watched steam here and learned what domes expect from echoes. A sultana's entourage once filled the upper galleries with a storm of whispers and almond oil. A poet from the divan wrote a couplet in the cool room and forgot it, only to find it later in the pattern of the floor tiles. Whether true or not, each story reinforces the point. Heat is fair, water unbiased, marble democratic. Even reputations are asked to dry on pegs. The bathhouse's etiquette circulates like air. There is a way to move with a bowl so that water goes where it should, a way to fold a towel that honors the next back, a way to sit on the warm platform that says, I leave room for you. These are not rules posted on the wall. They're rituals transmitted by imitation. The empire's strength is not in decrees but in these rehearsed courtesies that do not require officers to enforce them. The city has often preferred to govern by rhythm. As the sun tilts, the bathhouse tilts too, toward closure, toward careful undoing. The last wave of bathers arrives, people who work through heat and chose heat again at day's end. A cooper who hammered iron against wood all morning now offers his forearms to someone else's steady percussion. A singer who spent hours teaching children a folk melody says nothing and lets steam teach him silence. A widow unfolds a towel with the gravity of the newly self-reliant and finds, to her surprise, that the towel unfolds her too, making room for ease where duty had tightened. A young couple enters hesitantly, then becomes bolder as the room instructs them. They watch the pattern, rinse hands, rinse face, sit, breathe, accept the glove, accept the foam, accept the rinse, sit again, drink tea slowly. By the end, they are not different people, merely more themselves, which was the point they forgot in the tangle of debts and errands and opinions. Their towel folds match now, which is not a metaphor until it is. Evening draws the lines in. The keeper counts the day's coins in small stacks that look like ideas awaiting argument. He writes notes to the foundation clerk. One faucet sticks, one hinge complains, one tile has learned a bad habit, and ties them into a packet the furnace heat will dry into crisp advice. In the warm room, an attendant sweeps water away from drains in strokes that suggest a memory of calligraphy. The last bowls are rinsed 3 times. The third rinse is the bathhouse's way of respecting endings. The street outside is becoming gold with patience. Lamps are lit. Shadows lengthen enough to share between neighbors. The plane tree breathes out the day's conversations through leaves. The fountain keeps a constant. The bathhouse door closes with the quiet of a well-made sentence. Behind it, the furnace sighs into smaller work. In front of it, the city deploys its newly tempered citizens. You carry the heat home like a candle cupped in both hands. The discipline of warmth becomes manners in a line at a baker's counter, mercy in a short exchange with a boy who jostles past, precision in the way change is counted and gratitude is not. The rinse becomes a habit of letting small grievances flow off instead of soaking in. The scrub becomes an appetite for removing what no longer belongs, spite, stale certainty, petty hoarding of gestures, and leaving the rest intact. The foam becomes humor, covering soreness so the hand can work under it. The rest becomes the part of the day in which refusal and consent rebuild their friendship. A coffee house near the book market opens its shutters wide, letting talk cool the room that heat will soon sweeten. Its cups are moons yet to rise. Its coals are constellations the keeper rearranges. Someone waves. Someone promises to wave later and means it. A storyteller sets his stool and keeps his pitch gentle. Sleep claims the first row and will not be shooed away. The city eats with its senses. Steam, spice, clean cloth, lamplight, water's long grammar under every promise. It has many rooms. The bathhouse teaches them to agree without speaking. Toward night, the city repeats its lesson. The ezan rises like a hand feeling for a shoulder in the dark and finding it. Doors close with care not to wake neighbors. A mother taps a toothed glass against a basin and remembers a window of blue tile and a dome that held her sigh and returned it ironed. In the distance, the Bosphorus changes its mind twice and then keeps its third choice, as water does when it prefers dignity to drama. Lights in Topkapi go out in order. Kitchens cool like downshifting minds. The rooms of power rest on the rooms of heat. It has always been so. Sleep arrives the way the first pour of water arrived, across the shoulders, down the back, making the body say yes with a clarity daytime rarely affords. If coffee taught the city to talk, the bathhouse taught it how to listen. The night requires both. Dreaming is a second rinse, waking a second towel. The mind warms and releases, then warms again. At dawn's edge, someone sweeps the bathhouse courtyard before anyone sees the leaves. It matters to the day that the leaves were there, but it matters more that the leaves do not greet the first guests. The furnace is fed. The basins are set, lip to lip with the future. The soap is cut into green bricks, each one a promise combined from rain, grove, and patient labour. A new towel is nicked at one corner. An attendant notices the thread and ties it back into its family. When the door opens, the keeper raises his eyes and greets the first bather as if resuming a conversation paused only long enough for sleep to have its say. The ledger waits with calm lines. The first coin of the day is placed. The first pair of shoes comes off and remembers, unembarrassed, the posture of humility. Inside, the warm room breathes out and draws the day into its chest. The city will visit for 100 reasons that can all be replaced with one: to practice being gentle where it is easiest so that gentleness learns the route to harder rooms. The bathhouse does not offer miracles, only methods, towels, marble warmth, soap paths, the precise kindness of a bowl poured at the right speed from the right height. Empires shift, markets drift, fashions court and quarrel, but methods like these outlast, because they're trodden by feet that learn and teach and learn again. On some afternoons, a passerby will tilt their head at the steam that sneaks from the eaves and wonder why the sight moves them. It is because steam is the city's handwriting, visible only for a moment, but telling the whole story. There is heat enough to share, water enough to mend, patience enough to repeat what works until it becomes the way. Even if names change, Suleiman to another, Sinan to another, the rooms remain fluent. Kalalu will still cloud its windows in winter. Sembolitas will still polish the air with lemon oil. The small neighborhood baths will still be the pulse points you feel with 2 fingers. The foundation clerk will still sharpen a pen and a conscience at the same hour. The furnace man will still talk to wood. The attendant will still know which knot to press. The towel will still end in a fold you'll be embarrassed to realize you love. When you leave, it is not a farewell. It is an adjournment. The bathhouse taught the city to adjourn rather than abandon, and the city taught its people to do the same, with arguments, with labor, with love. Close the door softly. Keep the heat in your bones as if it were a sentence you mean to live by. Give water its work across your day. And when the edges roughen again, you will know where to go, which handle to lift, which peg to borrow, which bench to warm, which bolt to hold. The chapter closes where it began, with movement, not speech. Towels laid, marble holding, soap tracing paths where insistence relents. In a city that negotiates with seas and seasons, the bathhouse remains the surest treaty, ordinary, repeatable, quietly binding. It asks only practice. It returns only what you brought, newly bearable. And in that fair exchange, the day takes on the shape of a room that knows how to welcome and when to let go. The staircase begins before the mind is ready. Steps narrow, stone hollowed by 1,000 careful descents, hand on a rail polished by the same impulse, to steady the body as the air changes its mind. Warm street breath gives way to a cooler grammar, the kind written by water and withheld light. Istanbul, or if one prefers the old poem, Constantinople, waits above with its arguments, its simmet vendors, its domes that catch noon like a blessing. Down here, the city erases adjectives and keeps only nouns. Column, echo, fish, drop, hush. The first step is noise. The second is memory. By the fifth, Kul slips its hand into the traveler's sleeve and says, kindly. By the 10th, the day's heat is an old story told to a patient listener. A drop falls. Another follows at its own pace. The staircase turns once, then twice, as if asking permission to go deeper. Lanterns begin, each one a small moon trained to stay. Shadows learn the discipline of columns. At the threshold, the room declares itself without volume. It does not boast, it arrives. A forest of stone lifts into the dim, more than 300 columns repeating like a polite insistence, each capital a different inheritance, some Corinthian, some Doric, some improvisations of masons who refuse to waste a beautiful fragment. Above, a ceiling of brick arches. Below, a shallow lake of darkness that thinks with light. The water is not still. It rehearses the gentlest version of motion. Koi, pale flashes, orange commas, write their brief sentences against the black. The first sound the ear accepts is the drip that punctuates the room's long silence. The second is footsteps learning to be courteous on wood. A walkway slides between columns, its planks remembering everyone who has passed. Somewhere a guide whispers, Basilica Sistine, the Yerebaten sunk, the sunken palace. Yet this room's magnificence is not royal. It is municipal, a feat that made thirst someone else's problem. In the age of Justinian the Great, the city fed its palaces and people from here, water travelling from the Belgrade forest through aqueducts that leapt valleys in a single patient arc. Later, under the Ottomans, the cistern kept working, quietly, faithfully, because water is empire agnostic. Sultans changed, fish did not. Domes multiplied, drops stayed punctual. Walk slowly. The room rewards slowness. Each column, sweating faintly, gives back a hand's warmth with interest. Place a palm upon the limestone. Feel centuries recalibrate. The stone has learned to drink humidity and to give it back as consolation. High above, small brick vaults lean on one another like good neighbors. The air smells of iron, old rain, a hint of moss. If one must name a note, call it cool rosewater left in the shade. To the right, a cluster of columns carries the workshop marks of forgotten masters. A chisel once called here. Its echo lives on, smaller, but stubborn. The capitals bloom differently down this aisle, as if the cistern smiled at variety and kept it. A visitor counts 7 Corinthian heads in a row, then breaks the chain with a leafed improvisation. Another drop falls, left of center, a minor key. Water, when disciplined, becomes music. When left alone, prayer. Ahead, a light draws attention where reverence would have done. 2 blocks turn faces from history's margins to its center. Medusa, her hair a stone argument that could not be won. The first head is sideways, as if sleeping off a myth. The second is upside down, as if refusing to recognize the sword. Their smiles, if they are smiles, are older than the room that adopted them. They hold up columns now, like retired athletes supporting a child at play. People gather, speak softly, tilt phones, tilt heads. The water accepts their images and blurs them into mercy. Names are often heavy, Gorgon, curse, legend, but the cistern lightens them. Here, Medusa is not a warning, she is a foundation. Turn from legend and listen again. Somewhere in the dark, a valve sighs. A fish surfaces without ceremony, mouth opening to test the thin seam where room and mirror meet. The plank underfoot gives a mild creak, a reminder that every structure must be part marrow, part nerve. To the left, a niche remembers being a closet for tools or a rest for a lamp. Take it as a prompt and rest the eyes. Let the column grid align the mind, not as a prison but as a notation. 6 across, 4 deep, then again, then again. Grids can be kindness when the day has been an argument. Up top, heat scratches the city's back with a copper comb. Here, cool runs a palm along one's neck and shoulders until the vertebrae nod. A guide with a voice trained for tunnels tells a story in quiet English. The cistern's dimensions, the idea that soldiers in chain shirts once skimmed boats across its surface, a rumor that palace kitchens kept their water in jars named for neighborhoods, as if taste had addresses. A child asks if the fish have names. The guide says maybe. The fish circle a column as if that were an answer. Pass under an arch. The light thins, grows thoughtful. In the distance a modern installation glows, sometimes an amber sheen, sometimes a faint blue, careful not to bully the ancient tone. The cistern tolerates additions so long as they behave. A modern hand-pour echo of oil lamps returns in electric discipline. The room's old job survives. Keep, quiet, supply. Even the reflections stand at attention. Those who built the aqueducts knew the city's arrogance needed a partner called precaution. The Valens aqueduct once walked water across valleys in easy strides. The bends, the settling, the patient gradients. This is how thirst was defeated without drama. Under the Ottomans, a scribe in Topkapı Palace might have dipped his reed into ink tempered by the same water that breathed under these arches. A cook might have rinsed rice with a bowl's worth escorted here by drops that took days to traverse tunnels. A janissary might have wiped the dust of the Divan road from his brow with cloth dampened by the cistern's pulse. Names change. Mehmed, Suleiman, Ahmed. Habits endure. One cannot conquer a city. One can only learn its plumbing. Pause by a place where the walkway forks. Left, it aims for the columns nicknamed Peacock Tail, their fluting catching and releasing light in scalloped whispers. Right, it heads for the tear column, its surface incised with drops that seem to weep for the masons lost in a room's making. Lay a finger into one teardrop's hollow. The stone is cool, obedient, not sad. Take the sorrow as metaphor, not mineral. The cistern has, like any useful thing, survived many storms by minding its work and letting history perform the theatrics above. A pair of elderly friends shuffle past, hands joined not out of romance but as a braided walking stick. Their steps echo in a friendly rhythm. Da-da, da-da. One says softly, "Do you remember Kalalu Hammam?" The other laughs. "Lemon soap," she says, and the sound rises to the vault and returns lemon-shaped. Memory is a basin in this city. Everything worth keeping is poured from room to room, temperature adjusted as needed. The bath steam has become the cistern's cool. An attendant in quiet shoes, a modern guardian of an old hush, watches without intruding. He knows the room's moods, how it greets the first group of the morning with patience, receives the midday rush with a fatherly eye, and says to evening, "Rest your voice here." He can tell when a plank needs a nail by the way it complains. He points once to a child who leans too far over a railing. No scold, just an offered palm that translates into safety. In Ottoman times there were men like him in every working space, keepers of cadence, not merely of locks, the bath's telek, the mosque's muezzin, the market's kahya. Titles change, the function remains. Keep the rhythm, so the city can sing without losing breath. At the far end, the walkway reaches a platform where the darkness gathers its thoughts. The columns become silhouettes. The water grows less conversational and more profound. Sit here, if there is a bench, or invent one by leaning back against a rail. Close the eyes, not to leave the room, but to enter it fully. Count 7 drips, no more, no less, then open them again. The columns will appear more honest, their slight leanings, their scars from a mason's second thought, their algae freckles. Perfect things are terrible listeners. This room hears beautifully because it has learned to be imperfect on purpose. Return by another line. This time, look for the little creatures, spiders that have signed their names in corners, a water beetle that rose with absurd confidence, dust motes that have enrolled in a swimming lesson. The columns hum very low. If one is inclined to imagine, the hum is the city's unspoken deal with water. I will carry you if you carry me. The bargain has held better than treaties. A low sign tells how the cistern was rediscovered after periods of neglect. A house above, taps that tasted of old stone, a rumour of fish drawn up in buckets, then a hole in a floor, then this, an underground patience, waiting. The room did not protest its obscurity. It kept the water cold and believed in return. Some histories are told in battles. Some are told in piping. Near the exit, a pause to look back. The columns gather themselves for a portrait. The eye will take upstairs and keep between errands. The walkway recedes into a polite vanishing point. A last drop makes its appointment with the surface and does not miss. Someone laughs softly. Someone else presses a coin into a child's palm and says, "Try your wish." The child's coin will join older ones sleeping on the silt, a small republic of desires that need neither borders nor pedigree. Climb. The staircase returns the day in measured doses. By the third turn, the air begins to warm its vowels. By the second, the city remembers the traveller's face and finishes the sentence it began earlier at the book market or by the tram line. By the last step, noise resumes, kettle steam, wheel iron, pigeons dictating letters to the stones of Hagia Sophia Square. Above, the sunlight feels different, as if filtered through patience. The cistern's cool lingers in the cuffs and collar. The hush keeps its pledge in the chest for a while. Vendors' trays gleam. Minarets draft their lines against an obliging sky. A policeman nods at a street cat with the respect due a senior civil servant. Topkapi's gardens shift their green. The Bosphorus edits the wind. Somewhere a muezzin rehearses the evening azan under his breath, as if trying on devotion before sharing it. The mind clothes itself again. Names, errands, appetites, but the undershirt is still the cistern's cool. In another hour, a visitor might be seated with a glass of key beneath the shade of a plane tree near Sultanahmet, and when the cup rings the saucer a small bell, the ear will answer in columns. The fish will return as bright commas in a story retold silently. If the baker offers sesame and a smile, take both, and notice how the crumb's softness echoes the room's air, tender, measured, exact. If the tram sighs into its stop like an old poem catching breath, step aboard with the patience learned below. The city uses its rooms to teach manners to the day. The bathhouse teaches warmth, the mosque teaches attention, the market teaches barter, the sea teaches horizon. The basilica cistern teaches the art of reserve. Store what is needed, speak quietly, support more than one thinks possible, and trust gravity only after one has learned its dialect. Water is the oldest Ottoman official. It holds office without scandal. Stone is the bureaucracy that seldom fails if kept from pride. Light is the clerk that stamps each hour without complaint. Tonight, when the city's lamps are lit, strings of warm coins along the streets, beads of patience around the neck of a long evening, the cistern will close its door with a sentence that sounds like a promise. The fish will slide into darker handwriting. The columns will lean into their trained listening. The last drop will be the first drop's cousin and will keep the family traits: punctuality, modesty, usefulness. Above, conversations will braid in tea-scented air. Below, the water will practice the hush that lets voices become more than noise. And when sleep comes, it may arrive like that first cool breath at the staircase, unannounced, precise, kindly. The mind will descend a few careful steps, touch the rail polished by others, and find at the bottom a room of thought, dim, columned, steady, where the day can set its burdens down without dropping them. A drip will mark the rhythm. A fish will turn a small bright thought and let it go. The columns will hold what needs holding. The water will hush what needs hush. The rest can wait upstairs until morning. For now, remember the route. Past the tram, along the square, under the small sign, down the steps. Hand to rail, breath to cool, eyes to dim, ears to water. This is how the city keeps its promise to the tired. Descend, become lighter by listening, then return. The basilica cistern is not a spectacle. It is a method. And like all good methods in the city, it advises without words. Keep a reserve, honor your supports, and let quiet do half the work. The day returns to the doorway, but part of it lingers below, a ribbon of cool in the pulse. Before going back to the heat and the square, let the cistern finish speaking. Stand again at the rail and listen for distances. Not the kind measured in meters, but in patience. A drip crosses from one century to another without hurry. A fish turns, gold on ink, and the room signs its name with a small circle. The columns hold the hush like librarians hold a rare book, gently, but with authority. Down here, the city is the best version of itself, public, quiet, exact. If one were to write a ledger for Istanbul's courtesies, the basilic assistant would sit in the first column, keep a reserve, share without boasting, cool the temper before speech. In the morning, the market near the Grand Bazaar will bargain in a dozen tempers. At noon, Hagia Sophia will gather attention beneath a dome that teaches awe. By afternoon, Kalalu Hammam will lather the day into forgiveness. And under all of it, this, water that has practiced listening longer than any sultan, from Justinian's engineers to Mehmed's clerks to the gardeners of Topkap who watered roses before dawn prayers. Names are ambitious, water is reliable. Move along the planks as if reading aloud. Each section a line, each turn a comma, each pause a breath where the voice lowers. The tear column appears again, those carved droplets not sorrowful but studious, reminders that a great work requires both sweat and mercy. A fingertip fits the little hollow, and the stone does what it has done for 1500 years, stays cool and refuses drama. In the dim beyond, the Medusa stones wait with their sideways and upside-down serenity. Down here, even monsters retire into service. Their gaze, once a threat in myths, is now a foundation, supporting more than their story ever promised. A child leans over the rail, whispers hello, and a fish answers with a ripple. The room allows mistakes and corrects them with quiet. Think of the stair you will climb soon. The handrail has learned 1,000 grips. Tourists, workers, guides, elders, the couple that returns every 2 years to test whether the hush still knows their names. It does. Down here, identity is not proven by volume but by the way a body slows. The sistine recognizes gratitude the way a mosque recognizes the first syllable of prayer. A guide passes with a small group. The words are simple on purpose. Belgrade Forest, Aqueduct, Reservoir, Yerebatin Sunken Palace. He gestures toward the brick vaulting that hums without sound like a disciplined choir. He points to the small modern lamps, thoughtful, careful. This is how the old and the new keep truce in Istanbul, not by nostalgia, not by conquest, but by behaving. At a bend in the walkway, the light thins to a velvet, and the water chooses a darker sentence. A beetle rows its ridiculous boat with earnest legs. Dust learns to be dignified. The columns reveal their imperfections, chips, scuffs, shy leans. Perfect rooms are salesmen. This one is a companion. Imagine what lived on this coolness. A clerk in the divan at Topkap dipping a reed pen into ink that tasted faintly of stone. A cook in the palace kitchens, down the slope, near the gardens, cooling rice in a bowl of water that had travelled tunnels like a pilgrim. A muezzin from Sultanahmet, voice rinsed clean before the call, standing at a fountain whose pipes whispered of these columns. Even the janissaries, boots dusty from the hippodrome, would have washed their hands with water whose patience you can hear right now. Everything above learned its manners from what lay below. Up ahead, a platform invites a longer pause. Sit. Let the sound of the drops divide the breath. The city's noise drains from the ears like water leaving a basin. First fast, then slower, then an echo-shaped nothing. A bat murmurs across a high arch, careful not to disturb the grammar. Somewhere a coin touches the silt and becomes a citizen of the small republic of wishes. Everyone belongs here. No passport, only softness. If the mind wants a tale, give it an ordinary one. A porter from the spice market who found this place by accident on his day off, breathless from the heat, descending and learning a new way to carry. This time not figs or pepper, but quiet. Or the grandmother who brings her granddaughter and names the columns not with dates but with adjectives. Patient, generous, steady, polite. Or the young calligrapher who comes after the last tour, listens to the cadence, and takes it home to his reed, so his lines can learn to breathe. Now begin the return. Let your eyes visit what they missed. Notice the shallow scallops where feet asked too much of a step and were forgiven. Notice how the lamps throw gold ladders on the water and withdraw them without complaint. Notice how the algae green curls around a base like a signature flourish on a firm decree. Notice the walkway's kindly creak, a wooden voice that says, "You are expected, not inspected." Near the entrance, a plaque reminds that once, when the city forgot this place, people in houses above drew up fish from their kitchens and wondered how the sea had learned the stairs. The rediscovery was not a triumph, just a good remembering. Much of Istanbul is like this, found not with fanfare, but with a small O from a floorboard or a breeze under a door. At the first riser, pause. This is the last full breath of the cistern's air. Take it and keep it until the tram bell shapes the next hour. Climb. The first turn warms the voice. The second returns adjectives. By the last, the city has already fastened your errands back onto your day. A vendor calls key at the edge of the square. Pigeons compose their dotted letters across the stones. The dome of Hagia Sophia inhales the sky and exhales wonder. People stream and pull and stream again. Carry the method, not just the memory. When a line forms at the cimet cart, let your place be a column, steadfast, generous, making shade. When a taxi splashes a small grievance onto your shoe, rinse it with a laugh. When a discussion tries to boil, add the cool, a slower sentence, a lower voice. When someone asks for directions, pour an answer with the right tilt and speed, like a bowl of water in practiced hands. This is how an underground room teaches street-level kindness. If there is time, walk the short slope to Kalalu. Lemon and laurel will remind the skin what marble taught the mind. Or cross toward the hippodrome and watch children race their shadows between the two obelisks, learning a city's long lanes without knowing the dates. Or sit in the shade of a plane tree by Sultanahmet and let the tea glass ring the saucer. When the ring fades, hear the drip. Evening will come with its necklaces of light. Minarets will lift lines of devotion into the lavender. The Bosphorus will iron the day's creases flat. The square will cool to a humane brightness. And beneath the flags and laughter, beneath the steps and songs, the cistern will keep its office, counting patience, cooling tempers, tutoring silence. This is where the chapter ends, and the walk continues. If this quiet found a home in the chest tonight, keep it. If the columns taught anything useful, reserve, steadiness, a willingness to support more than one share, practice it tomorrow, then again. If the fish's bright comma punctuated a thought worth finishing, write it. The city is generous to those who learn its methods. Thank you for walking with me, down the steps, into the hush, back to the light. If this journey helped, tap like so others can find their way here. Subscribe if the next room's lesson sounds good to you, and share this with someone who could use a cool breath and a slow hour. Tell me where the city should take us next. A courtyard where shadows read poetry, a ferry where the sea edits our thoughts, or a library that smells like cedar and ink. Until then, keep the rail under your palm, the calm in your breath, and the water's grammar in your day. We'll meet at the next door.